It doesn't matter if we're talking about ancient river valleys or our modern coastal cities, humanity has always faced the same relentless threat: rising water. But with floods getting more frequent and way more intense, well, the old ways we used to fight back are really being put to the test. It all boils down to this one question, right? Every community near the water has to answer it. And for centuries, our response has been a real show of force, a strategy we can think of as the concrete fortress.
For most of history, our game plan has been pretty simple. Build bigger, build stronger, build higher. We've tried to conquer water with concrete and steel, basically creating a fortress to keep the floods out.
So, to really get a handle on this fortress idea, it helps to see it as one of two competing philosophies. On one hand, you have the fortress, the brute force method of building massive structures to control water. And on the other hand, there's this alternative, which we'll get to, that's all about working with nature's own systems.
So, what exactly is in the Fortress Playbook? Well, we're talking about what's officially called structural mitigation. This is all the heavy-duty infrastructure we know so well: huge dams, long stretches of levees, and those complex drainage networks under our cities. It's all designed to impose our will on the water.
And let's be clear, these tools can be incredibly powerful. Research shows that when dams are managed with really clear, effective rules, they absolutely slash downstream flooding. I mean, they're the very definition of control. But, and this is a huge but, here's the critical weakness of the fortress. It all hinges on perfect management. As some great research from Wallace and colleagues points out, the human factor can turn this amazing defense into a massive liability.
And the sheer scale of that liability is, well, it's staggering. This 38% figure tells a powerful story. See, a few poor decisions, releasing water at the wrong time or from the wrong reservoir level, can literally make a flood worse, jacking up the downstream flow by a huge amount. So the fortress, if it's mismanaged, can actually amplify the very disaster it was built to prevent.
And this pattern of having big strengths but also big weaknesses, it applies to everything in the fortress toolkit. Levees, yeah, they work, but their effectiveness kind of drops off the further back you build them. Reinforcing buildings with concrete, that can make a huge difference, sure, but it's a one-by-one solution. And our vital city drainage systems, one good storm can choke them with debris, making them totally useless right when we need them most. The bottom line is, the fortress is powerful, but it's also brittle.
So, this brings us to that second philosophy. What if, instead of trying to hold back the tide with all our might, we try to work with it? This is the core idea behind what we're calling the living forest approach. The technical term for this strategy is nature-based solutions, or NBS, and the goal here is pretty cool. It's to use natural ecosystems as a kind of infrastructure. So you start thinking of forests, wetlands, and healthy riverbanks as your first line of defense, all designed to slow water down, spread it out, and let it soak into the ground before it ever gets to our homes. And the research shows a really direct, really powerful relationship here. Hireth and his colleagues found that for every bit you increase forest cover, you reduce the peak river flow during a flood by about half that amount. I mean, look at this example. A 20% increase in forest cover can knock 10% right off the top of a flood peak. It's like turning the whole landscape into a giant sponge. Okay, but the forest approach isn't some magic bullet, especially when we're facing truly monumental challenges. For example, research on things like mangroves and salt marshes, natural coastal defenses, shows they offer only pretty marginal benefits against the kind of sea level rise we're expecting. Even nature can get overwhelmed. So, if the fortress is strong but brittle and the forest is resilient but can be overwhelmed, it kind of begs a pretty obvious question, doesn't it? Why do we have to choose? And this leads us to a whole new way of thinking: the hybrid solution. So the most promising path forward seems to be combining the best of both worlds. Just imagine this. You put smaller nature-based interventions, like leaky dams made of logs, way upstream. They don't stop the water, they just delay the peak of the flood. At the exact same time, you've got expanded woodlands in the area acting like that sponge, retaining a huge amount of water. What's the result? Well, the two effects combined to significantly reduce how deep the flood actually gets downstream. And listen, this isn't just a theory. A study by Zhu and colleagues modeled this exact scenario. And their findings? They're incredible. Combining these smaller, nature-based tactics with existing infrastructure, well, it reduced the peak water flow, it delayed the flood's arrival by a crucial 30 minutes, and it lowered flood depth in urban areas by half a meter. And that half a meter, that's the difference between a flooded basement and a completely dry one. It's a game changer.
So, what's the big picture here? What does this all mean for us? It's really about moving from a mindset of confrontation with nature to one of integration. It's about building smarter, not just bigger. So let's wrap this all up. When you put it all together, the path forward gets a lot clearer. The fortress gives us amazing control, but it comes with that huge risk of human error. The forest builds this incredible natural resilience, but it has its limits. So the future? It's got to be hybrid. By integrating these two philosophies, we can create defense systems that are both strong and flexible, giving us a much smarter, more sustainable way to live with water. And that really leaves us with one last question to think about. Just look at the landscape where you live, the rivers, the coastline. What does your community's defense look like? Is it a fortress, a forest, or is it maybe, just maybe, starting to become something in between?